Let's bring in my economics panel. All right, joining me tonight in Melbourne, the Herald Sun's Terry McCrann, and in Sydney, the Australian's economic editor, Adam Crichton. Terry, we'll start with you. In addition to the wage boost, of course, we're also told that young people, they're the ones running up the infection rates on this pandemic as well. So they get a bit of a win in one situation and not behaving well in the other.
Well, I think that the win is a very short-term win, obviously. It's a function of the way the JobKeeper package was structured initially, with no differentiation between part-time workers and full-time workers. That's coming to an end at the end of September, so that boost is going to disappear. But in any event, Peter, the broader negative for young people, both in terms of, as you mentioned, they're going to cop the bill for this in the long term, continually, for pretty much forever. But secondly, the damage to their employment prospects and to the prospects for the economy more broadly, I think is far more fundamental and far more long-lasting. So it's a very short-term benefit for young people. They are copying the pain of this. And I guess, as you say, they're also running up the numbers on the infections, but that's sort of incidental to the real dynamics of the economic fallout.
Talking of the economic fallout and the hit to individuals, Adam, you've got an exclusive tomorrow in the Australian newspaper about the uptake, if I can call it that, of the government's scheme to allow people to access their superannuation at this time of trouble.
Yes, certainly, that's right, Peter. On the front page tomorrow, I'll have the full details, but you're right, the scheme, which was announced back in March, April, as part of the COVID response, has been very, very popular. More than 2.5 million people have accessed average payments of about $7,800, and the government is going to release new estimates on how much money will be withdrawn. Now, they said $27 billion was the expectation. It's significantly more than that. It's in the low 40s, so that is quite something. And yes, you can get all the final details tomorrow. And also, there is more information on, crucially, how people are spending that money. You well know the Labor Party, some industry funds have been suggesting that it's wasted. Well, I think there'll be some facts to suggest that that's not correct.
Of course, Terry, it is their money, and I think this just underscores the point that a lot of people now on the government side, at least, are saying that we can't move to a 12% super guarantee because people want that money in their pockets now.
Well, they're actually obviously voting with their not their feet, but with their bank accounts. They want the money now. They want to spend it themselves. It's telling you. I mean, obviously, in part, it's driven by necessity. What's happened in regard to the economy, but more fundamentally, I think, and this is a point that Adam's been making continually. People are not really wanting this compulsory scheme, and to increase the scheme to 12% would seriously damage further wage growth going forward. People would pay for that. But more fundamentally, Peter, the fact that this $40 billion has come out permanently destroys the ability for that to actually fund the retirement of 2 to 3 million people on Adam's numbers. So you can't, that's not going to come back and create a pool of savings that's going to be sufficient to fund their retirement, even if you went to 12%, starting from zero for many people in their 20s.
All right, let's talk inflation data. Numbers out today, and unprecedented. We use that word a lot, don't we? Unprecedented fall of 1.9%, 3 months to the end of June. That's the overall annual number to the end of the financial year, minus 0.3%. Adam, what did you make of it all?
Well, look, certainly the headline figures were broadly expected. Look, it's important to stress the result was really driven by the free childcare that was in place from April through to June, and also a 20% fall in the price of petrol. So if you strip those things out, there was actually modest inflation over the year. But the interesting thing I found from the whole thing was that we've been complaining for many years about low real wage growth. Well, actually, last financial year we had the highest real wage growth for some time. if you actually had a job, because of course prices fell and wages went up by about just under 2%. So that was some good wage growth. Of course, the bad news is that the government forecasts this financial year there'll be zero real wage growth. Both inflation and wages will go up by 1.25%.
Terry, you've written today in the papers that this issue in Victoria, the resurgence of a second wave, or I think that's the first wave truly of community transmission, is going to infect, at least in economic terms, the rest of the country. I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in your take on this inflation data too.
Well, Peter, up to this point, Victoria has shot itself in the foot with the disastrous coronavirus second wave, but because it's a quarter of the national economy, if this continues beyond the 6 weeks, the initial close down period, this will drag down the whole national economy. And the real disaster scenario is if New South Wales went some way to following Victoria. So in a sense, Victoria is the pivot in how bad this can be, but also it's a big watch on New South Wales now that New South Wales doesn't go down this path. If I could quickly say on the inflation front, I'm not a fan of inflation, so I regard even 2% inflation as a bad outcome. So I'm not at all fussed that we've come in as a negative, and as Adam points out, with wages going sideways, this has actually delivered a real wage increase. Obviously, we don't want to have an inflation and a deflation and a recession as some sort of permanent feature. But as a one-off, it was inevitable. The government mandated it, and it's not something to cry over.
I want to look at this issue in relation to Westpac, Adam. The Attorney General, Christian Porter, has really gone after Westpac, accusing them of arrogance and of running a PR campaign in the way in which they're dealing with the financial crimes regulator. This is AUSTRAC. This is because we've seen previous examples, but now a whole raft of incomplete and inaccurate reports from Westpac made to the regulator AUSTRAC. We're talking about nearly 400,000 reports that are below what the law requires. I thought these numbers were huge. This is not just a few cases of sloppy paperwork. We saw all this stuff in Hayne, in the Royal Commission. What's likely to happen now?
Yeah, look, it's a good point, and of course, as you know, so many senior managers and members of the board have left, but the problems are still there. I mean, certainly this story for me was a real blast from the pre-COVID world, because we haven't been hearing much about this for a while, and indeed the banks, I think, generally have improved their public standing through the crisis because of their various deferrals. But this is just a reminder that there are so many structural problems with them. I mean, the reality is they are such large and unwieldy institutions that you end up with errors like this, and of course they cascade and they become enormous over time. So I think basically it's just a reminder that the banks are too large, and the incentive structure of the various managers is not such that they care about these mistakes. Someone else can always be blamed. So the best thing that could happen from this case is that there are major changes in the internal processes of Westpac, and also the other big three banks as well, who let's face it, have probably committed similar transgressions.
Terry, I have to pull up something I saw in the United Kingdom because I just hate the gimmicky waste of taxpayer dollars. Boris Johnson, who once, many years ago, obviously was a Conservative, I'm not so sure he's a Conservative anymore, he's out there promising £50 vouchers to people to go and get their bikes fixed in some sort of obesity drive and other things. Let's have a listen.
This is the most ambitious package ever. It's £2 billion. We'll have thousands of miles of protected lanes, £50 vouchers to help people get their old bikes done up again, cycle training, help with electric bikes.
He thought that was crazy. He's going to allow GPs in their NHS system, GPs, doctors, to prescribe bikes on prescription. I mean, seriously, Terry?
Well, it's just crazy, as you say, Peter. That's one idea I hope we certainly don't import from the UK.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Got to leave it there. Terry McCrann, Adam Crichton, thank you as always for your time.
Thanks, Peter.